Hello, and welcome to the ECR Retail Loss, Sell More and Lose Less podcast series. My name is Colin Peacock. I work with a community of experts and academics who are keen to share their latest research findings and best practices. And every week or two in this series, I'll be joined by one of those experts and academics to discuss some of the very latest insights from our meetings and discussions and research on best practices. This week, we're looking at the amazing innovations happening with RFID in store and in the supply chain. Once again, I'm delighted that Professor Adrian Beck could join me to discuss the latest learnings. Hey, look, we had our meeting of the Product ID team, a really big bunch of people, I think 40 odd people, 30 odd retailers, and we were looking to explore just new use cases for RFID. I think we've documented now the sort of inventory counting use case, better accuracy, less cost, more frequent counts, better visibility to what goes missing, handheld readers. But we were looking to sort of say, well, what's next? What's coming beyond that? And we had one retailer present a really great case of sort of a shopper-facing, if you like, use case. And then we heard from other retailers on the call providing updates on how they're using it in the supply chain and, in fact, just their overall deployments. Fascinating meeting. But what were your notes?
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? It's interesting how we've been looking at RFID now for 20 nearly 25 years now. It's been on our radar, hasn't it, in terms of a technology to be used in retail environments. And one of those sort of recurring themes across those many years is how are people actually going to use the technology, away from those core elements that you mentioned. And of course, one that really has come up over many years is smart fitting rooms. Yes. and smart mirrors. And I sort of flippantly describe them as the sort of the flying cars of RFID. These things that have often been promised, but nobody's really actually got them to work because the ROI has always been difficult, hasn't it, with these things? And yet, what was really interesting about the presentation was, here we had a retailer who'd invested in these, but actually seemed to be getting some really good payback out of these in terms of the way that the fitting rooms, but critically, and this is the really important part, isn't it, is that it's the information that they can get from the tags going into those spaces and the way that the consumer are interacting with the product.
Was fascinating.
Yeah, and so they were getting a lot of payback in terms of just that the richness of the data that's coming from, what consumers were taking into those spaces. But critically, they were getting stuff that was really helpful to the buyers around, well, was the sizing working? Were people who were taking in a size 10 always then having to go back and get a size 12 because it was never the right size? So they're getting lots of interesting feedback around that. But also, we're hearing how they were using it to try and, upsell as well, in terms of saying, well, you've taken that product in. How about, can we recommend that you take this product in as well? So it's one of the first cases where, a retailer is making a really powerful and persuasive case that through using these smart fitting rooms and obviously the data, they were making quite a difference. So it was really encouraging to hear that.
Yeah, what I liked about the information and sort of was a further build on what your points were, was that for the store manager, they get a real sense of, how many people are going into that changing room. Mm-hmm. And of course, I think there's a sort of inbuilt belief that if you can get someone into the changing room, not only do you stand a better chance of converting them, but of course, the returns, in a retail store, even for a physical retail store, could be 10% of stuff coming back because it didn't fit. We know online it's like more like 30 or 40%. So I think there's a sort of real benefit from store manager information as well. But it was interesting as well to hear the other retailers' reactions and what the other retailers were up to.
Yeah, it was. And I think, I came away with, we've on this long journey, I think, of people adopting RFID. And it has been a long journey, and I think companies are feeling their way now. But what I got a real sense from that just now the volume of companies that are now looking at and beginning to invest in RFID feels like it's a real momentum. And so we heard from, quite a lot of retailers on the call who were, pretty much investing for the core reasons that we've mentioned around on-shelf availability and stock accuracy and all these things. But what we're also seeing is that as these companies bed into that return on investment model, they're now beginning to creep out in terms of using it for other things. Not only, that we heard around the sort of the smart fitting rooms. But we also heard stories, didn't we, about people beginning to go back down the supply chain, using it in their distribution centres to get more visibility there. And of course, it's got a real potential around online as well, in terms of making sure that visibility can feed through into customers ordering stock online and making sure it's available. And then, I think we're also going to see how people are using it in terms of managing returns as well. So, it's really good to see this growth in investment in the technology, people beginning to get value from it, and then beginning to expand their business case as they become comfortable with the core reasons for the investment in the first place.
Yeah, no, it was fascinating. And we heard also some of the things around the complexity. If you're shipping RFID goods from a fulfillment center to a store for pickup, make sure it doesn't go onto the store's inventory. You've got to figure out how to do that. We're still talking about shielding and making sure you're not reading stuff. We've got all the good old issues still keep on popping up, which I think explains why this working group carries on. And we've got some real core members of this from around the world, who really do sort of give some valuable input to others and to themselves.
Yes. Yeah, I think, it was interesting, one of them where they were trying out using RFID in their supply chain, just trying to use it to try and monitor stock moving at the docks, for instance, and moving onto the trucks. And it was really, insightful. Just the challenges of getting that technology to work in such busy, complicated, highly challenging spaces for RFID. And they were trying to get it to work, but they walked away at this moment because it's just too complicated, too difficult. And, I think one of the dangers in those very complex environments where you're asking a lot of the tags and the tag readers in particular is you need to weigh up, don't you, which is how much do we invest in trying to make sure it works properly versus getting on with other things? It's got to provide value in and of itself. And if you're spending more time just trying to make sure it's done the right thing, that is the data actually accurate from RFID, then perhaps you need to step away and say, is this the right time for us to be using this to try and solve this particular problem? And I think for that retailer, they sort of said it's not actually solving the problem we want at this time using this approach. And so that was also very refreshing as well, I think.
Yeah, it's certainly not a sort of launch and leave technology, is it? It's launch and manage with a lot of care and attention. Yes. And don't mess it up. We've got I think we've got 3 or 4 more meetings coming up in towards the end of this year. We're going to look at we've seen product identification, which is what this group was called. We've going to look at more technologies, maybe even your green tooth idea. I think it's you had or something green it was involved in it. But we also going to look at RFID in grocery and also supply chains. So we've got some pretty inspiring use cases out there for the supply chain from Chipotle, who are using it to manage the sort of safety of the food, but also UPS are looking at it in the supply chain. So hope to hear from some speakers from those particular organizations. And then we should be heading to Barcelona in October and enjoying a sort of in-person meeting, just again exploring. We'll be based in a distribution center, so that'll be a lot of fun as well. So thank you very much indeed, and we'll certainly see you for the next one, which is on grocery and RFID in grocery, which we've heard people talk about. So thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Well, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to all the ECR Retail Loss community for the sharing of their knowledge, their research and latest learnings that ensure that we become truly a global platform for learning. My name is Colin Peacock. This is the Sell More and Lose Less podcast, and if you liked it, please subscribe so you automatically get all future episodes. And also, if you think your colleagues and friends might also like it, please ask them to follow ECR Retail Loss on LinkedIn and tune in to our next podcasts. If you didn't like it, then let us know and we'll try and fix it. Either way, see you next time. Thank you again.